smiling faces this morning. For those of you who missed last night, there were some excellent presentations, and we're very excited to already getting started in that respect. I wanted to reiterate some of the thank yous that were given last night for those of you who weren't here. There is a list of our sponsors in the program. They're a very outstanding and august group. I will not go through the list because I don't have them memorized. And I also want to thank the planning team that worked so hard on this for well over a year and really very dedicated. I think we were up to call number 32 or 33 for our official calls. And there was a lot of not only hard work, but a lot of heart that went into planning this meeting and bringing together all of us biochar enthusiasts to catch each other up on what the latest happenings are. Would the planning team please stand up? Those members that are in the room. And a special thank you to our leader, Karen Rivera, who did an absolutely outstanding job. I wanted to start with briefly just kind of setting the context. In 2013, there have been a lot of really significant accomplishments, a lot of growth. There are now 6 biochar organizations in Canada. I believe we're up to 15 in the United States. And we have 15 universities that have active research programs in biochar. And we're starting to see some more grants shake loose, which is really nice. And then we're also seeing a differentiation in the kinds of organizations, from regional organizations to statewide organizations to organizations that are focusing on marketing. We've got the Biochar Association, which has just started, and they are looking at their national group, looking at marketing opportunities for biochar, and the Pacific Northwest now has a working group focused on marketing. So we are maturing. You know, contextually, we're in a very difficult situation. Politically, instead of civil discourse, we have standoffs and what I would almost call extortion, and Congressman McGovern last night outlined that very clearly. Instead of democracy, we have demagoguery. Instead of a melting pot, we have people moving into silos and refusing to talk to each other. And I wanted to take a minute to salute our public servants, most of whom are not here, which is why you see a lot of empty seats at the table. Because of the government shutdown, many of those people were not permitted to attend, and those who are here are likely on their own dime and own time. So thank them profoundly. And economically, we're still not in a real recovery. And inexorably, the flow of money still continues upward at an alarming pace. We have a shrinking and morphing kind of job market. Instead of a career ladder, we seem to have career pit stops. And this can be very unsettling, but it also presents a lot of options and opportunities. In the environment, we have one of my most frightening things that I'd stay up at night and think about is the radiation still emanating from Fukushima, which if you look on the websites, even NASA has, NOAA has a map of the plume as it comes across the Pacific. We have, and with our energy, we're still in the death grip of fossil fuels, and with our food and water, the quality and quantity issues as well as distribution issues, and of course, we've well past the 400 parts per million of CO2e in the atmosphere, which is yielding a lot of weather perturbations. And our heartfelt concerns and thoughts go out to those who have been victims of the droughts, the storms, the floods, the fires, and the very unseasonable blizzards and unseasonable growing weather for those who are farmers. So we have a lot on our plate. However, despite all that, we are not up the proverbial creek without a paddle and a barbed wire canoe. We are all those of us working in biochar are very rapidly trying to build new canoes, new crafts, and new paddles. And we're bringing solutions to the politicians to show that we can model cooperation, that we can work synergistically to solve problems, and we can point directly at those problems, the ones that I've identified, rather than chasing the peripherals. And also, biochar has a lot of promise in terms of future jobs, local, low-carbon opportunities that are really conducive to life. And that's not just our life, but it's the life of the planet as well. And we're moving away from chemical dependencies. You know, chemical dependencies are considered really bad in humans. And why do we think that chemical dependencies in society and our planet are really good? So, yay for us for trying to move away from those chemical dependencies and improve our soil, our water, and our food. And of course, we're working on the carbon sequestration solutions, ways to feed livestock that would improve their health as well as their contributions or lack thereof to global warming, soil and water restoration, stormwater remediation, and many others. And so for all of that, I salute all of you who are working so earnestly in biochar. And with that, I want to get into the real topic that I want to talk about today. I do not have a PowerPoint, and I did that on purpose. We're going to have a little training and listening to a person talk without pictures, although I was really tempted. I got to tell you, I got some great pictures. All right, next year I'll do that. Again, thank you for your interest and your tireless work in promoting the sustainable production and use of biochar. And thank all of you who are attending who may not be in the biochar arena yet. You know, biochar is nothing short of an adventure. You know, it's an adventure in science, in exploration and experimentation and new frontiers, uncharted territory, and we are literally opening a new frontier. And the potential to resolve and address many of the crises that I mentioned are all right here within that biochar arena. And we're also working with a sense of urgency. I mean, we know that we don't have a lot of time to waste in debating the certain nuances. And that's why I was motivated to give this talk today, not because I want to give airtime to detractors, but because there is some validity in what they might have to say in some comments. In others, it's just inane fear-mongering. And what I wanted to do was talk about those issues, perhaps why they're doing this, and what we can learn and how we can model the biochar processes and our behavior as members of the biochar community in such a way that we can help dispel those myths without having to do a quid pro quo and a tit for tat kind of discussion. Show of hands, is anybody in the audience unfamiliar with biochar? Okay, we've got one. We will help you. You will learn to love it. For the sake of expediency, I'm not going to go into describing biochar and what it does. And there's a good brochure out the table, and we'll fill you in as we go here. So, jumping right ahead, we know biochar has fantastic benefits, the potential to deliver fantastic benefits, but we also know there's a lot of variables that, of course, not all biochar is the same, and knowing that, it becomes even trickier to respond to critics because there are a lot of nuances and a lot of variables. But I think it's to our credit that biochar is actually coming of age because we now have a lot of critics. I shouldn't say a lot. We have vocal critics. And so that means at least we're doing something and getting our name and values and the benefits of biochar out into the world. And again, I hate to give airtime to the detractors and the myths and the half-truths, but there are benefits of looking rationally at the critiques and the questions to determine if there's some real validity in there, and to also raise our quality level. And we can either learn from these criticisms or we can learn how to dispel them. And I'm saying this as much to myself as to you. We need to be really careful to avoid the same kinds of histrionics that we hear coming from from some of our critics, and try to focus on those comments which really have some merit, and in many cases there isn't a lot of merit, and so we need to decide carefully whether we're going to actually even engage when we have some of the strange things coming out. You know, some of the techniques that we see used are one of the very favorite is cherry picking, where there'll be a certain fact or pieces of data that someone puts together and then presents in a very alarmist fashion. One thing I read that was really disturbing to me was that in one paper that was criticizing biochar, they were lamenting the rising amount of imports of charcoal to the UK. But there was no definition of what that charcoal was being used for. I assume most of it was for grilling, but they made the implication that it was going to be used for biochar, and were lamenting that we were now up to 70 tons per year of charcoal being imported. To put that in context, the UK imports 18 million tons of coal. So I think that they might have their focus on something that is a little smaller than what they should be looking at. These overstatements are really meant just to alarm people, take advantage of what people don't know. I see a lot of messaging now that tries to include hot button words, GMOs, industry tar sands, oil, and others, which I won't even give credence to. But again, the challenge is to look at the real issues. And that's a little hard because one of the real issues that we have to look at is why are the detractors saying these things? Well, a lot of times they're not saying it just because they dislike biochar and they think it will be the ruination of the earth, but they're saying it because we happen to be a pretty good target. We're sort of small, we're not the oil and gas industry, we're obviously not the coal industry. And so, and because we're young and we're new, relatively new, the public is not as well versed in what we do and what biochar is and what biochar can deliver. And so therefore, we're easy to attack. Also, there is a different agenda out there. It's not exactly an anti-biochar agenda. There's more of a anti-biomass agenda, and the anti-biomass agenda, we are brought into that under that curtain. Also, detracting by a lot of yelling and being contrarian does tend to increase funding opportunities for certain organizations, and so knowing that that's what in part that's what they're after, that allows us to focus more exactly on what it is they're really talking about. And what they seem to be focusing on, I saw kind of 4 areas where they're considered as guilty. We're guilty by association, we're guilty of ignorance or hubris, guilty of too much complexity, and guilty just of being new. So therefore, we need to be pretty careful because biochar is now at an age where we can't afford a lot of missteps. And so if we want to fast track biochar into mainstream use, we need to be very careful about how we behave. Now, I am more than proud to admit that we are new, but we are actually reinterpreting indigenous knowledge, that we do get excited about the possibilities to improve the human condition, the environment, and climate, that we are indeed complex, but we don't necessarily control who all we associate with because we associate with so many and have so many partnerships and synergies. And we do have a bias for action because our life support systems are deteriorating at a pretty fast clip. So, guilty of those, absolutely, thank you. But let's look at guilty by association. It's really kind of unfortunate that we get associated with some aspects of biofuels and biomass use because some biomass users are really motivated by greed and therefore they have very limited concern for community and environment, and that bad rap spreads to a lot of people. And there are some really bad examples out there of biomass use or abuse. And in the biomass to energy arena, the energy return on energy invested is fairly low if you're just chopping up biomass and burning it. conventional fashion. And we don't want to be associated with that low level of energy return on energy invested. That's a very important arena. And we see this a lot in purpose-grown biochar, or purpose-grown biomass, excuse me, where native forests are converted to monocultures and the biodiversity is lost, habitats lost, native forest ecosystems are lost, and it impacts farmers and local people in a very negative way. So that is a just criticism, but we can overcome that by not depleting the nutrient cycle, by over-harvesting biomass, and by being very cognizant of protecting those lands that are best left for agriculture and for forestry and not converting them to plantations. The land use conversion piece is really very critical. A piece of that is also fear that there will be harvesting of old growth and large diameter trees to convert to chop up and use biomass. That's called downcycling. That's another thing that we can be very careful to avoid. And the idea of getting biomass or having purpose-grown biomass only on arable lands really does impact food markets and food distribution capabilities. And this is no small matter. The tortilla crisis that occurred in Mexico because of corn-based ethanol boom ended up causing a lot of disruption. The food insecurity and rising prices are really very much a contributing part of the upheaval in the Middle East and in Africa. So again, not spurious issues, but it's a misapplication to apply it across the board to all biomass use. We can fend off this with a number of techniques that I'll talk about in a minute. I don't want to act or be speaking all in negatives here. The other area I want to address in the guilt by association is the area of offsets. And this is very, carbon offsets raises a lot of ethical questions, because if misapplied, a carbon marketing scheme can actually be a license to pollute and a license to continue to pollute. And if the schemes are starting at giving away so many credits that polluting industries can continue as usual, and then the credits that they buy or trade for is just kind of icing on the cake, that really does not incentivize reducing carbon and reducing greenhouse gases. And so that's what we really need to be very careful of in the whole arena of offsets. We are also associated with tools like CDM, the Clean Development Mechanism, or RED, reducing emissions through development, deforestation. And those can be very good programs, but there are also some abuses occurring. And so if and when and where we're involved in those, we need to make sure that they're actually doing what they intended. So how can we address some of these? And by the way, I am jonesing more than anybody for a carbon market, so I'm not criticizing carbon markets or saying that we should slow them down. I really believe that they can help the biochar community and the biochar bottom line significantly, and we can offer an honest offset and honest sequestration. So addressing these, I believe that we really need to keep the concept of scale in balance, that we need to keep in balance not only with the sustainability of our work itself, but the sustainability of the feedstocks that are readily available. And one piece that helps that is decentralization and focusing more on community-based systems rather than large centralized systems, using the model from what I think is a now obsolete energy system. And focusing, of course, on using waste instead of virgin materials. And if we are going to have plantations, let's make sure they're on marginal lands, or they're lands that we're actually recovering and restoring through those plantations, and then benefiting from the biomass that we get from them. And in sustainable biomass, it's not just what you're getting, a flow of what's coming to you and being used, but also what's left behind on the places where that biomass comes from. We love to see sustainability guidelines move forward. IBI has been working very hard on that. USBI, the Pacific Northwest Biochar Group, we've all been working on those, and hope that they become the industry standard. And we also know that it's important to support and respect Native and Indigenous communities. Where we work, sometimes those are the communities that get taken advantage of the most. And of course, respecting and supporting habitat and diversity in the natural world. Guilty of ignorance and being too new. I'll put those together. It's really kind of a catch-22 because when you're new, there's things you don't know and there's things that you want to try. But if someone's telling you you're new and you don't know, so don't try, that becomes quite the conundrum. In a half-truth, we're blamed for lack of research. Well, at my last count, I think there were at least over 1,600 papers on the IBI website. I didn't actually count them. I did a little mathematical averaging. But yeah, of course there's a lack of research. There's a lack of research in every area. There's a lack of research in cancer, and how long has cancer research been going on? And so yeah, we're doing the best we can in that. We get blamed for a lack of poor or non-peer-reviewed field trials. Well, we do have some peer-reviewed field trials, but we also have a lot of experimental field trials that are going on, and anecdotally, we're seeing some really remarkable results. And frankly, a farmer or a person who is going to try biochar, they're not going to sit down and read 14 peer-reviewed papers. They're going to go out to somebody's field and look and see what happened. And they're going to talk to the farmer that's working that soil. And so, one of the things that USBI, I didn't tell you that we have a new website. It's very exciting. It just got put up this past week, where it's much more interactive. Well, much more than zero. The last website was not interactive. This one will be, is, and growing. And so I would encourage you, if you have anecdotal results from experiments, a USBI website is a good place to put those. IBI has a great bibliography of research papers, and I don't want to get into that arena with USBI. There's no need to replicate, but I'd love to be having especially US examples of successes, and a blog space for people who would like to blog, and a space for regional groups who would like to camp onto our website. We also get accused of lack of decadal studies. Well, we're not decadal old, actually. We have biochar, of course, it's been around for thousands of years, but the amount of studies have been much more recent. And so we are trying to address that, but we can't get blamed for long-term studies if we haven't been here long-term. And I read something where we were accused that we didn't really understand the TerraPreta process, and that we were not using pottery charts. And so I suggest maybe we can put pottery charts for decoration in our biochar from now on. And then someone made a comment that industrial biochar is not TerraPreta. Well, you know what? Tomatoes aren't Primavera, pasta Primavera either. But it's a very good start. So, looking at some of the other accusations, some say that there are better methods to enhance soils, such as compost. Well, we love compost. We think it's great. We want to use it. We want to use it with biochar because we think together they're going to be even better. And I haven't seen anyone in the biochar community absolutely dissing some other form of soil amendment, and I'm not including chemical fertilizers in that, but because I diss them. But we find that biochar can work with so many other current methodologies for enhancing soil, with permaculture, with microbes, with mycelia. Biochar is very, very synergistic in that respect, and so we're not trying to throw anybody out of the arena. We're trying to bring more people in and join us with biochar. You also hear some bogus things like pyrolysis is dangerous because it creates soil and air pollution. I've not seen any evidence of that, but it's a comment that's made, and it's trying to really play off the public's lack of knowledge about what pyrolysis is. And so this kind of fear-mongering and suspicion of new technology is a kind of a low blow that's thankfully fairly easy to dispel. So what do we learn from these accusations? Well, despite what they say, we can provide very strong support for biochar just by simply continuing to do what we're already doing, and that is continuing our research, our field trials, In our experimentations, first principles, do no harm. And then looking at the characterization, let us try to understand exactly what this wonderful black material is. And match, of course, the biochar to our soils and to the purpose for which it's being proposed. And we can continue to collaborate with our friends in composting, vermiculture, the mycelia microbes, and use innovative ways to charge that biochar and make the blends that really will respond to the issues that we have at hand. And then look at some really extremely critical questions, which I know we've looked at in part, but we need to continue, and that's the life cycle assessment, making sure that our energy return on energy investment is a real positive, and that we are operating sustainably, and that the carbon sequestration is what we think it is, and lasts the length of time that we think it does, and that we can, while we're doing that, we can also advocate for a reduced use of fossil fuels and other greenhouse gas emission reducing techniques and technologies. And we often complain that, the profits are growing so slowly. Well, there's a benefit to that in part, because if we're growing too fast and it looks like the next place to go gold mining, we could have a lot of people entering the space that just have profit as their motive. And one of the things that I really fear, and please tell me if you know of any of this going on, is that people start to use really questionable feedstocks, which might include hazardous materials or municipal solid waste, and then take the result and pass that off as biochar. That would be very detrimental, and that we can't really tolerate. And then the third arena that I wanted to touch on was this: we're guilty of complexity. We're too complex, and we're overstating the benefits. Well, yeah, the problem is that biochar has so many benefits, but that is also its beauty, and one of our primary points of pride is that biochar really can address so many issues. But we do have to be very careful not to overstate those. And we get accused of biochar there's a lot of variables, it's very different, so you can't generalize. Well, you can generalize. Breakfast cereals are very different, there's a lot of variables in breakfast cereals, but you can generalize about them. This idea that it's too good to be true, well, no, it's too good, it's very good, and it is true. And that's the switch that we need to make in that comment. And then there's this myth that of extrapolating that, let's see, the technology is complex, therefore it's probably too complex, and if it's not commercialized, then it doesn't work. And so if it doesn't work, and I'm not making this up, I actually read this, that modern pyrolysis is unproven, it doesn't really work, and so actually all the biochar that's being used right now is being made by traditional methods, creating excessive amount of smoke and emissions and particulates. Of course, we know that's completely bogus, but that's a comment that's out there. One of the half-truths that we're grappling with also is that the outcomes aren't controllable. Well, they are controllable to a certain extent, but there are certain things in dealing with nature and natural products and biological-based products that aren't controllable, and that's a good thing. We don't want to have a world that is totally controllable. But we stand by the truth, and we can act on what we know and continue to refine and seek knowledge and continue to build relationships. So, what I find really intriguing, and this is the wrap-up, so, is what the critics are not saying and what they're not talking about. Because they're not talking about a lot of things in the biochar arena. They are not talking about reclamation. They are not talking about horticultural, using biochar as a horticultural medium. They're not talking about water filtration or desalinization, livestock feed, livestock bedding, water restoration, the significant slowing of nutrient migration, the off-gassing that biochar prevents, and biochar being used as opposed to slash and burn, and biochar being used in areas that would be very prone to forest fires and losing the entire fuel base there. back into the active carbon cycle, particularly those fuels that are in the wildland urban interface in already roaded areas. No one is advocating going into roadless areas and building new road networks just to retrieve biomass. We're looking at a tremendous amount of biomass that's readily available right now. And so this whole idea that our critics don't even want us to get started is really evidenced by the fact that they cannot and will not address all the other benefits that biochar does. They just look at the biomass right now. And they're ignoring the fact that primarily we intercept the waste stream. We're actually upcycling waste materials. So I believe that we will be readily able to weather these criticisms by exemplary action, by holding our industry to high standards to our integrity, honesty, transparency, and sustainability. And to minimize our exaggeration, we don't need to exaggerate because the benefits are very clear and very astounding. And to implement intelligent principles. Keep local where we can, decentralize, store carbon, look at low carbon, low energy, and low water footprint, and keep that as low as possible, and practice self-policing. You know, while we cooperate and support each other, we also want to make sure that everyone is also living by those principles and values to prevent mistakes and missteps. And ultimately, there's only one thing that we have to focus on, and that is ethical behavior. That's towards other people and towards the earth. So with that, let us char.